where the officials can have an effect.
Right.
And they definitely did on this game, and so that's how it all played out. Stafford, he's had some really good moments against the Vikings. He's had some bad moments against the Vikings. If we look at just really recent history, the Lions swept in 2016, a couple close games, and Stafford bringing them down at the end of the game to help win on a couple occasions. Then the team split in 2017, and the Vikings swept in 2018, winning 24-9 at US Bank Stadium. That game was well renowned for 10 sacks by the Vikings defense, and Danielle Hunter, a career day, 3.5 sacks, a fumble return for a touchdown, and Everson Griffin, 1.5 sacks. And so a lot of good things happened that day. Dalvin Cook had a 70-yard run. The Vikings had a hard time moving the ball in that Detroit defense that day, as you recall, but the defense was so dominant. Then they played better in terms of the Vikings offensively in Detroit, won 27-9, second to last game of the season. Kyle Rudolph had a huge day that day, 9 catches for 122 yards and 2 TDs, and Cousins 21 out of 28, 253 and 2 touchdowns. So we'll see what the mix is. If the Vikings can blend the great defense from the first game last year and the good offense from the second game, then they should have a good day in Detroit come this Sunday. But Matthew Stafford, I think he's somewhat of a little bit of an interesting case. I think he has a lot of talent, a lot of ability. He just doesn't always perform at that level, and he can blow hot and cold out there, as we saw in Green Bay, even from half to half. And to me, I don't think he's an elite player in the league. I think he's a good player, and he's obviously paid like a good player. He's still in that upper $20 million a year category, along with Kirk Cousins. But he's not Aaron Rodgers. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Russell Wilson. He's not that super elite category, or Tom Brady, for example, and Drew Brees when he's there, and Ben Roethlisberger when he's there. Definitely Stafford is a notch below all those guys, and maybe further than a notch below. But I think it shapes up as a really should be a good game. I think it's a very important game. I had said going into the 4-game stretch starting in New York, I felt they needed to win at least 3 of those 4 to get to 5-3 at the halfway point to set themselves up for what looked like a really tough second half of the season. And now they've won the first 2. If they can get this one, not to say that the Redskins will be a cakewalk on Thursday night, but wow, you got to think that's got to be a W when a team travels on a short week, which Washington will be doing. They've struggled this season, lots of trouble, and so I think that if the Vikings can find a way to beat Detroit and then get past the Redskins and be 6-2 at the halfway point, boy, they're in really good shape. And then they hit that kind of really tough stretch of the schedule. But even looking at that schedule, Jim, those teams aren't playing great right now. And We're talking about Kansas City, talking about Dallas, talking about the Chargers. The only one in that kind of murderer's row of 4 road games in the second half of the season that going into the season, they were all playoff teams from last year. Well, the only team that's really playing well is Seattle.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And who knows how they'll be playing when the Vikings actually go there, but it doesn't look quite as frightening as it did even, just a couple of weeks ago. Let's talk about Russell Wilson and the NFL at large. Do want to thank B52 Burgers and Brew, locations in Lakeville and in Inver Grove Heights, where Jeff does his show. Jeff also did a sporting news piece this week on Russell Wilson I want to talk to him about. But first, let's thank B52 Burgers and Brew.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And love talking about our newest sponsor, B52 Burgers and Brew in Inver Grove Heights in Lakeville, and the Inver Grove Heights restaurant, 5 minutes from Vikings headquarters in Eagan, and terrific restaurant. They have outstanding food, a terrific menu, 25 varieties of burgers, and great entrees and appetizers. They have Monday night specials, a fun rooftop patio, and a fantastic Sunday brunch. And as you said, they are the Inver Grove restaurant, the home of our Monday Night Purple show live on News Talk 830 WCCO. And just had a great show the other night with Harrison Smith and BC Johnson. A lot of great support from the folks showing up, and full house at the restaurant. Everybody was excited after the big win over the Eagles, and and Harrison and BC were in great spirits. So it was a fun show to do the other night, and hopefully next week will be everybody will be just as happy. And CJ Ham will be our special guest, a Minnesota product, and CJ having an excellent season as the lead blocker for Dalvin Cook and playing about half the snaps, and basically is a starter at fullback and doing great things on special teams too. A great guy, and so look forward to CJ Ham on our show next week. And as I said, I co-host the Monday Night Purple show with Joe Anderson at B52 Burgers and Brew in Inver Grove Heights, and we talk about the previous game, the upcoming game. On Monday night, we'll talk about the Washington game coming up and the just finished Detroit game, and we hit NFL hot topics and get to know the players better. So check us out. Check out their website, b52burgersandbrew.com, and hope to see you there for Monday Night Purple.
So you wrote about Russell Wilson. He might be the most valuable player in the league right now, and he's always been my favorite player to watch. I grew up watching, Burt Jones and Roger Staubach, and I loved quarterbacks. Of course, you can throw it, but who could also run and show some bravery when necessary. And Russell Wilson he's a phenomenal passer. He's a phenomenal runner. And as Seattle keeps chipping away at what used to be the Legion of Boom defense, as they give him fewer and fewer options offensively around him, he still thrives. So he doesn't have Doug Baldwin. They don't have the greatest defense like the way they used to. The offensive line isn't particularly strong, and he just finds a way to win games.
Yeah, he is just such a tremendous player and gifted athlete, and obviously one of the most dangerous quarterbacks in the game, as the Vikings saw last year when they played on Monday night in Seattle. He made big plays with his legs and his arm, and I think he's a terrific player. I think he's a credit to the game. He's a class guy on and off the field, does all the right stuff, and I think he's just really a fascinating story. And what I wrote about in my sportingnews.com story was that he kind of paved the way in a big way, I think, for I don't want to say he's a small guy because he's pretty stout, but he's short. He's short. Yeah. At 5'11", and there was always that bias against shorter quarterbacks, and that's why players like Fran Tarkenton and Drew Brees fell out of the first round because of their lack of height. And the same thing happened with Russell Wilson, drafted in the third round, 75th pick overall by John Schneider, the GM in Seattle, and it shows once again that the NFL draft is an inexact science, as we know. And I think he has paved the way for Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray the last 2 years to be drafted first overall. And both of those guys, Mayfield is barely 6'1". I don't even think he's that tall. And Kyler Murray's 5'10", but they're such superior athletes and players, even though Mayfield's got a ways to go to prove that, and so does Kyler Murray as an NFL player. But I think that Russell Wilson, more so than guys like Drew Brees or Tarkenton, even Joe Montana was not a real stout guy or big. He was 6'2", though. But
he was tall, but he was lean.
Yeah, he was lean and not the biggest guy around. But I think that Wilson, more than those other guys, has kind of changed the dynamic in terms of how NFL scouts and GMs evaluate quarterbacks because of the way the game has evolved, too, into more of a pass-oriented league, more wide open offenses. The rule changes, no contact on receivers for 5 yards has opened things up in the passing game, more zone read stuff. So these running quarterbacks, like a Russell Wilson, when he chooses to run, can be more effective and more rollouts, more play action. So I think the game has changed, but I think Russell Wilson, just a terrific player. Here's an interesting thing to me, Jim. And what I said is, to me, and I looked at the 7 quarterbacks selected with the top overall pick in the current decade, from 2010 to 2019. It started with Sam Bradford, who we're very familiar with here. Sam Bradford, Cam Newton, Andrew Luck, first players off the board, 2010 to 2012, all had their careers derailed by injury. 2015 top pick, Jameis Winston, disappointment. And then the jury's still out on Jared Goff, Mayfield, and Murray, who were drafted number 1 in 3 of the past 4 years. So at this juncture, clearly the best quarterback drafted in this decade, and the only surefire Hall of Famer among that whole group, is Russell Wilson.
Yeah, it's amazing. and he was playing at Wisconsin, and he slipped in the draft. I mean, it's just I just loved watching him play in college, and I thought that I'd love to have this guy running my team. And I think he's an example of how NFL teams sometimes overthink things. They find a flaw instead of emphasizing what somebody does really well.
Yeah, exactly right. And as we said, such a great athlete, so elusive and can run, but he's also smart about when he runs, and which is why the guy has never missed a game due to injury, which is amazing in 8 seasons. And he's been nicked from time to time. He plays through it, and as you said, he's never really been blessed with a great offensive line, and he really hasn't been blessed with I'd say elite top 10 receivers. Doug Baldwin, a good receiver. He was a Pro Bowler, but you don't consider him a superstar receiver.
No.
And Tyler Lockett is a good player now. He's been to the Pro Bowl, but he was selected to the Pro Bowl as a returner. Mm-hmm. So he hasn't had great receivers. He hasn't had a great offensive line really ever. But he did have a great support with the defense, but he played a big part in contributing to that defense because he was an inexpensive player as a third-round pick until he got his second contract, and then he jumped to $22 million a year, and now he's $35 million a year, and all of a sudden you can't have all those great Legion of Boom players on defense that they had in the heyday, and so they've lost the Earl Thomases and the Richard Shermans, and they also got old too, and the Cam Chancellors, Michael Bennett's, and just that whole crew that made up that fantastic Seattle defense. And Bobby Wagner is about the only guy who's still there.
Yeah, you said it exactly. And by the way, if you're new to the show, Jeff is the former Vikings general manager, former NFL Executive of the Year. And also thank you to our producer, Brandon Morton. Reminder, we have a deal with Bite Squad. The code is TalkNorth for your first delivery fee waived. I do recommend going to bitesquad.com and seeing if they have an even better deal in your neighborhood. Bitesquad.com. Morning, noon, night, home, office, wherever you like, or upload the Bite Squad app and make things really easy to order from your phone. So you mentioned it before, some of the highest touted teams in the NFL aren't playing that great. You have Kansas City, Dallas, the Rams, all a little disappointing at this point. Philadelphia, too. Which of those teams do you see breaking out and still being a dominant team at some point?
I think it's Kansas City to me that now, I know the Rams just traded for Jalen Ramsey, which will certainly help their cause in the secondary. But I think something's amiss there with Todd Gurley in the offense, and so I think they're capable of recovering, but they're also in a very tough division with the 49ers seemingly for real, and Seattle is for real, and they're a good team, and so I think it's going to be tough for the Rams with that schedule, playing a first place schedule and all that they've got to deal with. And they're certainly capable. They've got the talent, but we'll see what happens there. Dallas is kind of an enigma right now with what's going on down there and how they've gone from 3 straight wins, although they beat a bunch of lousy teams, and now 3 straight losses. And we'll see how that all shakes out. Kansas City, I think, is still the team that's got talent, and Andy Reid, I think, will get it back together. And I think that we're kind of in a situation where they weren't being pressed real hard by teams, and now all of a sudden they have to kind of respond a little bit and play better and shore up a little bit. They've had some injuries on defense that hurt the cause. And Patrick Mahomes, I just think because he's such a superior player that he'll be able to kind of rally the forces, similar to what Russell Wilson could do in Seattle when he doesn't have the greatest supporting cast. And so I do see Kansas City as a team that's most likely to be able to respond and make a run down the stretch here and kind of climb back into the fray. And as I said, I think they just felt that they're going to cakewalk through their division. All of a sudden, the Raiders surprisingly are playing better, and they have a big game in Chicago this week and could do the Vikings a little favor there if they can do what they did. Or actually, they beat Chicago. They go to Green Bay, right? Is that their game?
Yes, they're playing Green Bay this week. Yep.
Yeah, they play Green Bay, and they already did the Vikings a favor in Chicago.
Yes.
Now they get Green Bay, and they can help them there. Green Bay on a short week, as Detroit is when the Vikings go there. So we'll see. And I was kind of surprised to hear you say that Russell Wilson was your favorite player, Jim, because I always thought that Patrick Mahomes was. So I'll have to tell Patrick that I'll tell Patrick that you bailed on him because they lost 2 straight games.
Well, Wilson's basically been my favorite player